Going to a different one, the for the food portion of the FDA, it's actually because of the amount of regulations that occur due to food, which again we always think if it wasn't for the FDA, we'd all be eating dirt and chairs. It's got to be a slogan somewhere. We got to put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
So watch for our
next
store.
T-shirt we wear.
T-shirt.
If it wasn't for
if it wasn't for the government, we'd all be eating dirt and chairs. So you have regulations put in place for food. Well, again, you have already different standards that are in place, like different accounting procedures, ISO 9000, 9001, whatever it is now. There are already private standards that you can say, like here, Bronson Hospital. Mm-hmm. I swear they have one person whose job it is just to find whatever award that they can find for the best hospital for whatever it is, because
like,
they
have this.
Yeah, they have like high marks, A pluses, ones, whatever the best marks are for hospitals, and it could be something for like the best hospital food is this this private standard, or like the temperature controlled room, or whatever it might be. It always seems like they have just a ton. Mm-hmm. So you have already private standards that be in place, and you're like, oh, I don't want a hospital that butchers me. How am I going to distinguish between these two private hospitals without any government regulations? Oh, well, here's one that's proud of all these different types of regulations, and I know company XYZ is really, they're just, the hardest company to get a good standard by, a stamp of approval. Mm-hmm. Oh, this hospital over here has that stamp. Ooh, that name associated with that hospital is going to drive my traffic there a lot more.
Yeah.
And I'm in competition with a lower quality. So there you have probably a lower price, lower quality, or a better price, better quality. Oh, heaven forbid that limited resources like healthcare is divvied up.
Yeah.
But you have, for food, you have the same process, except you have the government coming in, hurting smaller businesses. So the way different crops here are regulated in Michigan tend to have just varying different degrees of regulation to it depending on what it is. So you have sweeping legislation made on blueberry production.
Yeah.
Well, there are ways to ship blueberries, and there's a place here in Michigan that actually patented one of the best means for freezing blueberries. So there's regulations that how food is preserved, how it's transported, how it's kept, and all that is regulated by the government. And so when it comes to chickens, in the United States, it's easier and cheaper for the slaughter of chickens to happen here. Chickens are frozen, dead. They're shipped over whole to China. China renders everything out and cuts them up and processes them, freezes them again, ships them back over the ocean twice to come back here because of the amount of regulation that it's a headache for people to do. Now, if you have, Farmer John who's, wanting to sell his chickens for the farmer's market, he's got to abide by the same regulations that KFC chicken processing does. Well, KFC has the ability to say, oh, well, I can take an entire boat full of our chickens and send them over to China, or take a hit for whatever the cost is for violating these things. And that's what I never understand too, is like there's a violation of EPA guidelines or FDA guidelines. You got to pay $10,000. Where does that money go? It doesn't go to like improving the safety of whatever that is, it just goes back into the federal government for whatever it means.
whatever they decide to use it. That was the chicken thing. It's funny. I was watching another documentary. I watch a lot of documentaries.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. I like to watch informative television. But
in the Walking Dead documentary, I found that it's best to separate the head from the body.
Yeah. So you take like these big giant corporations and their chickens, and most of the time it's just in this shotgun style building, and you have thousands of them and they're crammed in there. They even showed like this one farmer was going through and picking out the dead ones each day because it's just a known thing they're going to die. And then they had this guy that was kind of doing free range on his own land, and he would butcher and like chop up in like the open air because he had like this covered area, but it wasn't in a barn, and where he would butcher his animals and everything like that, and then chop them up and get them ready for market. Because they take him to they started out taking them to the farmer's market, but then more and more people heard about like his better chickens, and people were coming from miles around buying that stuff. And then the government comes in and tells him, and like shuts him down, tells him he can't do that with his chickens. He's got to do it in a closed kind of confined area, for butchering them. He can keep them free range and everything, but and he challenged them, and he had a test done himself. He had a test to see how much germs are in where he works and on his chickens from what his process he does, and then tested against the big corporations and how they do it, and the farmers work for them to do it. And I don't know how many parts per million or whatever they decided, but he was like way more clean than the government regulated ones were. Mm-hmm. So he's doing it on his own, just happens to be doing it his own way, and he's already a higher standard than what the government says, but they tried to shut him down until he fought back like that. And it's just ridiculous that you go and you show the government regulated one is not working. It's terrible. You're eating actually food with more germs on it and more likely to have bacteria on it than this guy, Farmer John, who just decides, well, I don't feel like building a barn. I'm just going to go underneath this covered area and keep it clean myself, mm-hmm. and chop up my chickens before I take them off to the market.
Yeah. Like Mike Rowe has, I think it was a TED Talk where he was talking about Las Vegas pig farm where they castrating the pigs, or the sheep. It was the sheep. Okay. And it was like, well, here's how you do it. You put your teeth on it and you clip it off, and a little bit of blood, and the lamb goes on prancing around his way. And he's like, well, no, I want to do it legally. So it's like, well, okay, here, take this rubber band, put it around it, and in 2 to 3 weeks it'll fall off. But then the animal's pained and slow.
Excruciating pain. That's got me pain for 2 to 3 weeks.
And so here you have it. Why is that? Well, because it slows down whatever the means for the reason for doing that. I'm not really exactly sure.
Yeah, why does the government care about how an animal is castrated?
I'm sure it's done for a purpose, but it's to slow down the people that have a smaller flock that needs to do that quicker. Well, then you have the big corporations that can wait because they have a larger amount.
This guy over here's got 1,000 sheep, and he doesn't care about waiting 2-3 weeks, but this guy's got 30 sheep, and he needs to, snip.
Yeah. So, again, arbitrary numbers. It's not always best practice. And even if when it is, like raw milk, it's illegal for you to
delicious.
Sell raw milk.
No one sold it to me, though.
Yeah, no one sold it. Yeah.
I went to the milk. I went to the cow.
Yeah.
I got it myself.
The cover of Night.
Yeah.
I hope you asked for consent.
No, I did.
You got it in writing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The farmer allowed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you have, the statistics come out like, you're not homogenizing, you're not pasteurizing it, you're not irradiating milk.
Yeah.
You're not removing, these suspected.
You're not removing the good stuff like we want you to.
Yeah. But it's okay for you to drink breast milk as a child, but that's. Well,
and it's crazy because it's like, it obviously, raw milk can't be that bad for you because they're just making the sale of it illegal. Farmer Joe can sit there and drink it all he wants because he gets it from his cows and he doesn't feel like doing that. But
unless the government comes in and
is like, no, now it's illegal to even drink it. Yeah. But I drink it, and guess what? I'm still alive.
Although you were sick, So,
Ooh, maybe that was my no.
After a year and a half of
Yeah,
drinking.
a year and a half later, I got sick once for a week of a sinus thing.
Yeah.
I'll take that side effect. Every year and a half, I have a little sinus.
You got to get it out of you.
System flaw.
Well, there you go. Well, and we talked about the food pyramid a lot, but look at again to put more traffic that Joe Rogan needs from our three listeners.
JRE.
When Joe Rogan has people on that talk about different types of diets and exercises and food eating regimens, and how there's certain people that, oh well, if you're wanting to do this is how you should eat, or how did keto come about? Keto came about as a treatment for was it blind? Not blind. It was it helps diabetes. Seizures. People with seizures.
Oh, okay.
Blind people with seizures. Same exact thing.
Yeah.
Same exact
Same
thing.
thing.
Yeah. But then it was found to be beneficial for people with diabetes. But you can't talk about this stuff in the way of like, oh well, it has potential to help with this, but you can't do studies to say, well, is there a way to cure this through nutrition? Well, again, who's going to do those studies? Because there's no incentives from large corporations to put R on that. But then you might have people that say, well, in my 40 years of counseling people on keto, this is the way to do it. And I found that in my sample size of 10,000 people who had type 2 diabetes, that they were able, that 80% of them were able to go off their medication with doctor supervision. Well, that would be a huge number, but there's such a process for undoing all the regulation for you to even make that claim.
Well, yeah, and
and limiting your free speech.
The big drug companies then are going to come in and be like, well, no, it's not just a diet. You need to take our pills too, because if you could just eradicate so many things and so many diseases by just changing a diet, then the D part of the FDA would crumble, because companies would never, big drug companies would go out of business, because it's like, oh wait, I don't need this pill, I could just eat broccoli. Not saying that works for anything, and just an example.
Or,
I don't know.
Or government schools, where in gym class they tell you, oh, you won't be fat if you run and exercise like this. But again, I've always said that I can run a 5-miler. And burn off 300 calories. I come inside, I eat an entire normal Snickers bar, and I've just negated my run.
Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day. Why don't schools teach anything about better eating, health, like home ec? I mean, that class just taught you how to cook things, and we made cookies and stuff. Yeah. Why didn't it teach us how to make real meals?
Yeah, or how to read things, or what exactly.
What
those photo
things mean on the back of the
photoritsin or photonecessitate or words that you can't pronounce? It's like, well, where do you, how do you determine what natural flavors are? Are those good things? What's yellow 5?
I use natural flavors in this product. Yeah. What's a natural flavor?
It's a blueberry.
Yeah. Did you squeeze a blueberry into it, or did you
mix this chemical with this chemical, and it kind of smells like blueberry?
You naturally mix these chemicals, or you just squeeze the blueberry in there. What did you do?
How much juice is actually apple, and the rest is this artificial
or
flavoring?
How much juice is even in juice?
Yeah.
1% juice.
Not only that, but we have juicy juice, which is 100% juice, and you know it because they said juice twice.
Yeah. Juicy juice. It's extra juicy.
Let's talk about one more topic. Right. So this will definitely be 2 episodes. So you're probably listening to the second episode.
We're getting into JRE times now.
But this is what happens when you bring libertarian people not over Skype.
Yeah.
Let's talk about minimum wage. Matt, what is the problem with minimum wage? Why do you hate poor people, and why don't you want them to be rich by having the government force companies to pay them $15, $20?
This is why I hate
I'm going to go on record. I'm going to go on record and say we need companies to spend $100 an hour in order to help poor people.
That's a living wage. Why not pay them a living wage
in California?
Yeah, why not pay them a living wage? Why can't we pay them $100? Okay, here's why minimum wage. needs to not be so high. First of all, is you're taking people who have minimum wage. Take that first word, minimum. You have like almost no experience, minimum experience. You're a 17-year-old looking for a part-time job, and you go to McDonald's, and you can easily be trained to be a burger flipper there or whatever you do. I never worked at McDonald's. I don't know what they do. I just eat the food sometimes, and I shouldn't. But that's minimum. So you have no experience. Hey, fast forward, 5 years later, you've got quite a bit of experience. You can get paid a higher wage, so you don't have to work for the $9.50 anymore. Like, you can get a higher wage.
You've developed skills.
You've developed skills over time.
Multitasking.
You're worth more.
Interact with customers.
So you started at that minimum wage, and I mean, you could even take like someone just out of college. I was talking about this the other day. You take the 18-year-old just out of high school, hasn't had a job yet because let's say they were playing sports and whatever, so they get a job at McDonald's, and then you get the college student who wasted so much money on a degree and hasn't been able to use it, and they're just looking for a job.
College students.
Yeah, they're just looking for a job, so they go for that same exact job at McDonald's, and so the 18-year-old has no experience. They should get started minimum wage, but you pull somebody from college. Yeah, they haven't been in the working force, let's say, at all, because let's say they just got a free ride or their parents were able to pay for it. They're privileged like that.
So they're only white people is what you're talking about.
But and they go through that, and they already have more. They don't have job experience, but they have more life experience, and they have hopefully better critical thinking and things like that, so they can start out higher. Like it's just crazy to think you pay somebody $15 in like Kalamazoo here. $15 is a pretty good wage.
That's really good.
That's not what minimal should be. You're so by telling me $15, like then somebody who has a college degree should instantly make, I don't know what, 40, something like that. Because if you have minimal skill, you're like someone who's never had a job before. That should be the people that get the minimum wage. And you're telling me someone who's never worked before deserves $15 an hour. So, and it's just gonna make it's gonna inflate prices on everything. I don't think that's the biggest thing. I don't think people understand. Is like, let's make $15
inflation is another tax because it's done by the government.
Yeah, and they decide how much. But $15, okay, the mom and pop store. Or any store, Meijer, okay, they're a big store. They can afford to have cheap prices, but all of a sudden they have to hire a bunch of people in at $15 an hour.
Or use robots.
Yeah, hopefully at that point they would just use robots because $15 an hour is ridiculous. But if they can't use robots, let's say, because they don't want to pay for them, or they think they're going to rise up and take over the world, which they are.
It's kind of...
they have to pay everyone there at least $15 an hour. And then the people with experience should be making more than that, because you can't just tell somebody with 10 years experience, like, sorry, I got to start you off at $15 because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
So you're either not going to have enough workers, you're going to have inexperienced workers, and that gallon of milk that cost you $2.50 is now going to cost you $3, $4, $5 because the company is now using that much more money to pay for all their employees. Like.
Yeah, it devalues the position that, you're right, someone who's got 10 years in there.
And all these companies that, somebody makes $3 over minimum wage now. Let's say minimum wage shoots up.
You're telling me that there are people that there's not a majority of people that get paid minimum wage?
Yeah.
Well, I thought corporations were evil and they were greedy and all they care about is their bottom line.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that there are companies that don't pay people the minimum wage on average?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Want to know why?
How is that?
Because they want to attract better working people.
What?
People will actually work harder for more money a lot of times. How do you incentivize somebody in a job?
Oh, well, you give
them a pat on the back.
Yeah.
Hey, good job.
No,
you give them more money.
Bucks. Give them Disney bucks.
Yeah.
You tell them, hey, I validate you today.
Yeah. Like, yeah, a pat on the back's nice sometimes.
Sure.
It's good to know your
when
value.
I do that one good thing, good job really well. Or,
But it's the way that I would love to be incentivized and rewarded in a job is like, hey, Matt, you did a good job. We're going to give you a raise. Or just like that. Or we'd really like to make everyone happier. Let's have an employee, happy day. No, I'd rather have like a bonus.
Yeah.
Or, take what you would have spent on this party.
Give me a 20-cent raise.
Yeah, give me 10-cent raise.
Yeah. Rather than this
one party that
where I'm going to go to a food coma and
yeah,
forget about it in a week. What have you done for me lately? Well, if you're raising my rate of pay 10 cents every paycheck, then it's better than spit in the eye.
Yeah.
It keeps people with limited skills as a barrier for entry. And we hear all the time about the left and different communities saying, oh, well, this is a marginalized population, this is a marginalized community right here. Well, that's a way to marginalize them further, is increase the barrier of entry, because a burger slinger, someone who's just on the line making burgers all day. If I'm a good business person like McDonald's is, I've figured out the value of everyone's work, so I know what to pay for them. Now, again, people who are really good at slinging those burgers down the line, they've increased their productivity, or they've limited how many mistakes they've made, so it's kept overages low. I'm going to give that person specifically. I'm rewarding that person for their good behavior as an employee. But I've come to notice that at the very beginning, a person who's a burger flipper, a slinger, that person's job is only worth $10 an hour, with all things considered.
Yeah,
I've now priced out all those people who have zero skills, and I'm going to pull the old person that was like, well, I'm retired, I don't have a family in the house, I was used to making $40 an hour at my old job, but I'm retired now. I used to work at McDonald's, and now I want another job. Or am I going to hire the kid who has zero experience? Well, I've just priced that person because I have to pay someone $15. I'm gonna utilize that person with at least experience, so I can say, well, that position's still not worth $15 because the government's forcing me to.
Yeah.
And if I need to hire somebody, which I probably won't hire someone if $5 more per hour is over what the rate of pay is.
Using all your profits to invest in robots.
Yeah, I'm going to further marginalize a marginalized community.
Yeah.
And we see that even today when throughout the country right now, as far as 2008, the jobs for young people are diminishing for those entry-level ones, and they're being taken by the college graduate or the older folk who have to stay in work longer because they're living longer, and there's no requirement for Social Security to increase with age either.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Like $15 an hour, I can understand if you wanted to make that in a big city like that.
And maybe, but because
even
you
then
have a big city, so you have a bigger population, and that's what a federal mandated or even a state mandated, like well, for us it's no longer Detroit. Royal Oak has a higher standard of living than Kalamazoo, Michigan, by a lot there. So paying somebody in Royal Oak a different wage makes sense because you have a larger population, you have a more expensive population.
Yeah.
So you have a community that you can charge $1.50 for a hamburger rather than $1.
Yeah.
And so you're able to utilize more of that capital for capital goods purchases or employees. And people always think like, oh, employee payments, they're 20, 30, 40%. No, most employee your biggest factor when running a business is how much you're paying employees, and it's something like 70 to 90%.
That's a big portion.
That's why the whole paying women 77 cents on a dollar, I think we mentioned this last episode, doesn't make sense, because if I'm able to save 30% of my overhead,
I would hire all women.
Women would be what I hire.
I would have,
unless if I'm a huge misogynist, sexist pig.
And even then you're just dumb. Because if you're that misogynist to not think about saving 30%,
30% is a lot.
That's it. Like, think about if you owned a huge, think about if you ran Amazon, richest man in the world. What, Jeff Bezos? That's his first name. Yeah. If women are really making 70 cents on every man's dollar, then if he were smart, he would increase his worth substantially if he just fired all the men and hired only women. A full women workforce, 30% of he would gain an extra 30%.
Well, and maybe we can stop the disparity between male to female deaths in the workplace, where men are 90% more likely to die in the workplace. I say equal representation there, Matt. Yeah. We need more deaths at work for women in the workplace.
We need more women as iron workers.
Yeah, or garbage collectors, or miners, or fishermen, or people who lift heavy things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were in an elevator with a person and her husband. They were intoxicated, and they were joking like, "Oh, this guy's gonna hit you." And she's like, "Oh, you would never hit me, would you?" I was like, "Hey, we're all created equal now." So offended.
Yeah.
So offended by that comment. I was like, "Whoa! I'm clearly the better feminist here out of me and her." So
she got offended that you would hit her, but if women are really feminists and they want to be equal, I mean,
yeah. And women taking, let's say it's true, 77 cents on the dollar. Women are stupid then. Women shouldn't be in the workforce if they're allowing for their labor to be produced at a 30% decrease.
If you have the same exact education, same exact experience, skills, everything, and you're in the same exact job, and you're allowing the government, or not the government, the person you're working for to pay you 30 cents less, then you're just dumb.
Yeah.
You need to ask for a raise. You need to find another job.
Yeah. And if you know that, if you know you're being paid less than a male counterpart, you first have to determine, is there a shortage in your work? Because that's a thing that people don't understand. There are people that I know who are in a job, a woman, a man was hired, and found out that he was getting paid as a person no experience, but an education in a good job, to come in at a larger pay than her. First of all, knowing that information, go to your employer. Say, hey, I've been here for so many years. I have more experience than this person. I know what they're making. Why is this the case? Yeah. But at the same time, if your job requires 8 of you and there are only 6 of you, there's an incentivization to hire people away from competition as labor, to bring them in to fill up the 8 spots needed.
Yeah.
And so if you're competing, because you're not a monopoly, unlike the government, you're competing with different grocery stores, hospitals, manufacturers. Pick your thing. You're in competition with
bagel shops.
So many things. If you make a better bagel, or if you know if you went to bagel school and you have no experience, but you have the choice between three bagel companies, and it's like, well, they're nice, they have nice facilities, but this one's going to pay me $2 an hour more to start with 0 experience.
Yeah,
I'm going there. And so if you aren't asking for a raise on top of that, and you don't get it, that might be the case. That might be the case. Well, we need to put it into recruitment because things like nursing is always at a low. Like there's always a shortage of nurses that we hear about. Well, why do you think when that was announced when we were in college, at least when I was in college, when you were overseas having fun in Japan and South Korea, how come we saw a greater increase in the number of applicants for nursing? Well, that's the reason.
Because there was a shortage.
So, minimum wage then. Also, this whole fight for 15. I found this news article on Seattle Times, which is such a conservative rag. Seattle, which actually has a socialist on their county board that's pushed for this whole $15 an hour, paid time off, holiday pay, maternity pay, all the bells and whistles for it. They've cut out an exemption for unions that the unions asked for. So the unions said that they don't want to have their workers that they represent to be starting out at $15 an hour. Why? Because then they can lower the rate of pay for the people that they're bringing in by saying, hey, you have to be a union person to work for this company, this manufacturing company, and we're paying them 12. So you're saving three. There's your 70 cents on the dollar
Yeah.
person. We're giving you $3 off, and that person's got to be unionized. So what does that do? Well, that creates a desire for companies to hire unions or bring unions in to unionize because they're saving. That they don't have to follow the 15 an hour.
Yeah.
So especially if you're a small company that has a potential for growth, well, depending on how desperate you are for labor, you're making deals probably with not quick turnarounds. So you're not making like 2-year deals on contracts or something like that.
Yeah.
So you're able to you're agreeing to maybe longer term contracts, and if you blow up between then and the end of the contract, well, you've just unionized your entire company, and if the contract expires or you want to get away from it, well then unfortunately unions for some odd reason just have the same ability that the government has, which is to use force to stop people from taking jobs. And that's what we have here in Michigan too. The reason why you didn't have non-union people going and taking over the loaders for when the work stoppage happened because of for the roads, it's because the union has knocked out all competition for people who aren't in a union to utilize those type of machines. So that's what you have here is you have the ability. So like, why would the union do that? Well, dues. The United Auto Workers Union. So who do they represent? Well, it's not just Ford. It's the United Workers for auto workers. So if you have Tesla popping up and you can get a union in there, but you're saying, hey, if you unionize Tesla, you get to pay your workers less because you're not needing to follow a minimum wage standard if you unionize. So boom, you've just included 3,000, or let's say 3,000 people work at Tesla. 3,000 auto workers for Tesla, and you have a contract for 10 years. That is guaranteed income for you so long as the Tesla doesn't shut down. So there's an incentivization for the union who has control and power, and again that revolving door of union people going to the government going back to unions, being on boards, and you have this. Here's why is no one talking about this? Well, it's because it's a left desire to have 15, but it's also a left desire to have unions, and so you can't say anything bad about it. So
how dare you say something bad about that?
Yes. How dare I say that I want to be able to represent myself if I choose, and if I so choose to collectively negotiate contracts, which is perfectly fine. I'm okay with unions would be perfectly fine with me as long as there was an ability to opt out, especially afterwards, and they didn't have to result in violence if I wanted to hire non-union people. But it's all about the contracts that you sign, which again is what? Private property. And so you would have the ability to then say, in a more free market area, you could go to a person who, not a judge, but a arbitrator, and say, well, I'd like to hire 10 people to be non-union. It's a violation of the contract, but here's the arduous position it puts me in, and you could say, whatever agreement we can come to, because I need those 10 people. And you say, the union people say, no, you can't hire anyone because that's what our contract says. Well, without these 10 people, I can't do my job. So we either shut the business down or I hire these 10 people. You go to an arbitrator. Arbitrator says, well, all right, so pay the union, $5,000 and you can hire 5 people. Okay, well, then there's a compromise. We all agree to it. The terms of the contract are still there, but when you have a government enforcing it, there's no ability to
there's no ability to do that,
to come to an agreement like that.
I think we just need to abolish any minimum wage, because you yourself should know how much you're worth.
Companies know how much you're worth,
and the job,
and the internet. The internet is there. Glassceiling.com has lists of this is what you should be making, and you have the ability to report what you make anonymously to to a website and it says, okay, for every let's say it's like server wages is done, and you just make whatever you make as a server
and we get rid of
without
tipping
tips.
because we
Please
should.
let's get a tipping.
Japan does that, and it's good.
Yeah. So, but you're gonna have a more expensive meal in the end, or not because you aren't really, because you're figuring in tip into everything.
Yeah.
You're paying for that person's wage. Man, I completely lost my train of thought. Servers would make X number. I don't remember where I was going with it.
I don't know. Abolishing minimum wage.
Minimum wage, yes. You could report how much you make as a server to glassceiling.com.
You could know,
and then you can go on there and say, oh, I'm looking at server jobs. Let's see how much, Tutti Frutti, the restaurant, makes. Okay.
Yeah.
They make, on average, they make 14. So I'm going to ask for $13.50 because I really need this job.
Yeah.
And so I'm
I
making
don't have a ton of experience, so I ask for a little less. Or I have more experience, so I'm going to ask for a few dollars more, maybe have a little wiggle room in there. Like, it's just, and companies can also decide, like, okay, this is like you were saying earlier, this is an entry level job. We value it at $10 an hour. So you can go in there and be like, okay, well, it's close to what I value myself at. I don't have much experience, so I'll take this $10 an hour job and get experience, and that way down the road I can ask for a higher paying job.
Or hey, I'm not a college student, so I'm able to give you hours during the day. I won't flake out every summer and go back home.
Yeah.
I'm I'm more reliable than a college student. Whatever you can do to market yourself, you can have that greater ability to do so.
But won't companies start only offering jobs for $4 an hour?
Maybe.
But guess what?
But guess
if people don't take those jobs for $4 an hour, then they're forced to raise it themselves.
Yeah. Well, and just
they have no workers.
with our price gouging, supply and demand operates on labor just as much. So if you're a mining company and you're paying people $4 an hour, who is taking those jobs?
Yeah.
Unless
there's
not
a
even
massive
4
amount of miners just bidding for those jobs, and it's like, well, we have a ton of people wanting to work these 20 mining jobs, so
demand is up, then supply would be down.
We can pay them less because they're gonna take it as the only job they want. But
or we want more people, and so we're taking on more people.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna diminish the amount we're paying people.
Yeah.
But I mean, you look at that for. I think we talked about it maybe in our education. This country, if you want a job, if you want a guaranteed job, one that's not going away, getting into a trade skill is where the money is at. And
they need people now too.
And again, I say if my daughters want to take up welding or whatever specific machine operation thing that has been in use for 60, 80 years that doesn't look like it's going out, I am completely fine with it. But that's where the shortage is at.
Electricians.
So let's say you're coming from Florida, you're moving to Michigan, you've done lathe processing on medical equipment your entire life. You will find a job because you've got the experience. And why? It's because there's not a ton of you there to fill that spot. And you're able to then utilize your experience not only there, but even in other processes that might have similar breakdowns. And so you might even have a management position or a higher up position, whatever creative position, where you might not even be doing the work that they hired you to do because you're a master person, but you're training people underneath you to develop those skills. So they're hiring you to be an awesome trainer just by your expertise. So and that's a different way to market yourself too. So I've been out of the game for 10 years. I've been traveling the world.
Keep pulling me back in.
Yeah. I've taken a job with the mafia, and now I just want to be a humble lathe operator. You can sell your different qualities of that. It doesn't have to be, well, I can only do this one thing. It's why older people thought they had to go back to school, because it was that classical mindset of, well, you only get education in school. I don't know how to use a computer. But you can say, hey, I don't know how to use a computer job. I'm willing to go through classes if you'll offset it with me,
Yeah.
and then bring me on, and then let's reevaluate in a year, 2 years, and let's see if I'm worth more than what I was. I'm here to put in the hard work, and I mean, as a person who interviews a ton of people, half the time, if people would just say, "I'm here to work," and really mean it, most of the people that I interact with who are looking for jobs are, yeah, I mean, I just heard about this job, and it sounded good, and
Yeah.
looks like a nice spot.
Or they say they can work first, second, or third shift, but then when you throw them on third shift, they're like,
I need to get on first.
I can't really hack it,
Yeah,
so I can't do that.
yeah. So and again, there's a sight unseen of a business owner who's taking a chance on a piece of paper on a job resume.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you look good. You look good on paper. You look good coming in. You dress professionally. You talk a good game. And I've at the job that I'm at, there's a specific person that I know that was going to take over this big facility and a large portion of event processing and cash and a lot of people. And when it came time for him to utilize those skills that he claimed he had, it ended up not being the case. So he got moved to the boonies for all intents and purposes. and you have someone there who, if you would have put in a greater effort or been honest as well, like if there are things that you are lacking in, there are ways that companies, especially companies who don't have to maintain regulations that get in the way,
Yeah.
not for safety reasons or anything like that, because those things will be self-regulated by the market. Because hey, I've heard 20 people die at your facility. Guess where I don't want to go?
Your facility.
Yeah. So it was different though back when the Industrial Revolution happened, because they were new processes. They were the factory was such a new thing. Work safety wasn't a thing, and people were trading off work safety for the amount of pay that they were getting,
Yep.
which at the time was astronomical, and done not because of unions and not because of the government, but because someone needed labor more than they needed the money at the time. Which, like Ford, that documentary that I've watched on Ford, first person to pay a $5 an hour wage, which was astronomical
That was
during
a
the time.
lot back then.
So much, and he needed workers, and that's how you attract workers, is by increasing pay or incentives. I really forget who it is. I know I've heard it on Tom Wood's podcast, where a researcher actually went out to third world countries and say, hey, if you were given the option of being paid more or given paid vacation or safer working conditions or an air conditioning facility, where would you rather the money go, to you or to the facility by the business owner? What would you choose? And it was something like 90% of recipients said that they would rather take the pay. Why? Because they need the pay more than they need to sit in a cool office space.
Yeah, and
It'd
maybe
be nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
But
to
if you
sit
have a
and
limited
negotiate.
amount of resources, especially as a third world company, which, if one in every two companies over here fails, what is a company over in a third world country?
Yeah.
So you have labor wanting pay, that incentivization over any other incentive.
Because air conditioning at your facility is not going to pay your rent.
Yeah.
But more money will.
If you're competing with labor and pay isn't the only attractor, maybe you throw in, some industrial fans that keep people cool. And it's like, well, I make the same as you, but over at Bill's sweatshop.
Yeah.
We don't have to sweat as much.
anymore.
Yeah. It's nice and cool, and it
So we
really
go
makes
work
me
at
happy.
Bill's sweatshop
Yeah.
for the same amount of money, and we don't have to sit in our own sweat.
Yeah. So again, the free market allows, with the understanding of the non-aggression principle, which libertarian principles aren't this pie in the sky. Well, we'll get there someday when we seize the means of production and we overthrow the proletariat and we seize the capital goods of manufacturing and the plight of the proletariat will break their chains and rise up to a new level of utopia.
Yeah.
Non-aggression principle occurs every day that we go to work. It's part of every process that we have in life, because for the majority, people don't want to use violence for getting people what they want. Even in dictatorial countries, fear only gets you so long. In mob type establishments, you don't go and break people's legs. There's always the threat of breaking people's legs, but you're never happy with that arrangement.
No.
I mean, there's a necessity for you to seek out the mob for whatever reason, for loan sharks or whatnot. But the government is there because it is able to utilize force. It seems legitimately for them to get even a possible directed action out of its subjects.
Yeah.
Libertarian principles don't. It's scary because there's no one in charge, but there always seems to be an order for how things occur. John Stossel has a really good example of this. Is you go to a skating rink, an ice skating rink, dangerous, blades everywhere, ice, children, old people holding hands. It's complete anarchy, but yet people are traveling around in the same direction. A few bumps here and there. People don't run over each other. You're not seeing limbs just sprayed out on there. You're not seeing people blow through in their vehicles through crowds, unless you're in France. But you have this organized anarchy that arises through
Skate park too.
Yeah.
Like, a skate park. I mean, you don't have people just. I mean, you're the douchebag if you're in there dropping in on other people's times. But you got people here. I want to try out this area over here, so we'll wait our turns. This guy did it. I'll go. I'll do this. And there's no rules. There's no person just blowing a whistle.
Yeah.
All right, Jimmy, you go.
Oh, go a little
then Timmy,
slower.
Yeah, slow down over there. Jump higher.
Yeah.
You know, it's just everyone kind of just naturally takes their turns. And then when you get the one bully in there that tries to overtake it, you know, people force him out.
Yeah, then you have private property to say, I'm banning
Yeah,
you
you're
because
banned.
you're not following the rules that we set in place.
Yeah. You get to go to France.
Yeah. Oh, man. So I think that's it for this episodes if
Yeah.
you've watched them back to back. It might even be more than that. But so we've covered pretty much everything for free markets.
Yeah.
But
There's probably so much
sadly,
more.
that's not the case. Sadly,
No.
this is like when we were talking about planning this episode, we're like, what do we talk about? There's so much, and that's a sad factor.
Yeah.
But at the same
we
time,
covered this little pie of it.
again, on a local level, this is where you have the greater impact. When local governments establish regulations, you have a greater impact against them because they have to listen to by percentage. They have to listen to a larger percentage to them. When you expand it out to a federal level, there you have 300 million listening to the 10 million who are in public office.
Yeah.
But here, you have Alamo. You have 3,000 people that 5 people have to listen to, and if they want to get elected again or stay in the positive light, then you have to do what's best for that population size. It would be better if there was no government and you just owned your own
Yeah.
property and were able to exist peacefully
Imagine
amongst
that.
people. But we're not there yet.
You drop it on the half pipe when it's your turn.
yeah. Because why would you go to that skate park if people were just being crazy?
Plus, if you drop it on the half pipe at the same time and you guys haven't planned this out, you might run into each other.
And it's private property
Yeah.
in our world.
Yeah.
It's not a public, unwatched area.
I know. I could be on my own half pipe in my own land that I own
Yeah.
and I don't pay taxes on. I legitimately own. I don't just lease.
Yeah. Unless we wanted to lease it.
I could lease it then. I could lease it out to a farmer that isn't incentivized by all these subsidies and actually can just sell his product for what it's worth.
Or consume it all if he
Or
wants to.
or eat it all himself.
Right.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So next episode, we're doing foreign policy. Very, very important. Probably, other than the drug war, it's probably the biggest drain on the moral psyche, the definitely the economic impact, the greatest economic impact. It's just on a moral level, probably one of the most important topics that no one is interested in either.
No.
And that's clear because, again, you have a majority of the federal government supporting the war with Yemen. It's pretty much chomping on the bit to go to war with Iran. And just every war has been a unanimous support of thunderous applause until it's no longer popular.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be covering that next episode, and then after that, we're going to be covering a few objections. We might even do a bonus episode because I know we were a little late with this one, and by the time we get it all edited and out, it'll be a little bit longer. But there's an interview that someone is responding to commonly libertarian principles that I found that I think she makes wrong but interesting points that might be an interest for your philosophical minds. So with that, as always, live radically and live free.
And privatize it.
That's right.